Hello folks, I'm Philip B, and this is Victoria 3. Welcome to the quick guide to the Ottoman Empire for the early moves, and as well as dealing with the sick man of Europe, malice. So the sick man of Europe affects the Ottoman Empire because the Ottoman Empire is in a state of decline. It's at the precipice of falling down and becoming terrible, and losing its status as a great power. So it's your job to try and resolve this. So what we need are some great reforms. And to do that, you should go over to the journal and take a look at the reforms you need. So there are 6/7 reforms you can do, but you only need to do 4. And the kicker is that you only have 20 years to do it. This may seem like a lot of time in the game, but it is not. You'll be pushing the limits of your ability to get to this in time. Often, many of these things will not complete until year 15, year 17, year 18. You'll be right at the edge of getting this completed before the malice gets removed. So this is my quick guide on what to do and what not to do to get rid of the sick man of Europe, malice. So the first thing we should talk about are the reforms you should not complete. These are the reforms that are too difficult to do to be able to complete it within the 20 years. You're welcome to try them yourself, but I recommend these ones be not completed. The first one is to reclaim Syria and its subsequent reclaim Egypt, Tanzimat, the hidden 7th one. These are too difficult to complete because the Ottoman Empire is very weak at the beginning of the game. Yes, we have a large army. If you take a look over here in buildings, you can easily see your army. We have 145 barracks and 63 conscription centers, giving us over 200 units. However, our tech is terrible. Look at technology, we go to society, and over here we're barely even started into the first level techs, and many of the empires in the game are already working on tier 2. We do not have, this is not military, we do not have line infantry, we do not have the shield guns, we do not have percussion caps, and we do not have Napoleonic warfare, even though Napoleonic wars have ended for more than 20 years now. That also being said, we have our neighbors who don't like us, particularly the Russian Empire. And if we were to make any moves against Egypt, who also doesn't like us, Russia would likely get involved and we would be crushed between the two of them. And for those reasons, I do not recommend working on the Syria conquest, and we can remove that from the list as possible. The second one I don't recommend is education reform. Now this one seems like an easy win, because all you have to do is build 5 universities in your capital, or anywhere else, but the capital is probably the best place to build it, get them up to 90% occupancy, and then have literacy rate of your people increased by 35. Now, at first read, this sounds like you should move it from 22 to 35%, and this is where the problem lies. It's not from 22 to 35%, it's from 22 to 57%, because this is an additional 35 literacy, which is difficult in such a large, largely rural empire with not a lot of educated workers in it to start with. That also being said is that the main way to get education is to change your school system, which for the Ottomans has very little support other than the religious schools, which you could probably get past if you tried, and even then you're wasting time getting these laws changed when there are other important decisions you need to be making to complete the other 2 of the other reforms here. So I would not recommend doing education reform either. It's too difficult to do in that period of time. It's something you should go for in your empire, but not during this. The first reform we should be looking at, and you should try to do right from the beginning, is suppress separatism. It also happens to be one of the easiest ones to do. All you have to do is wait 15 years. Yes, that's 3/4 of the time that you have to complete this mission. However, all you have to do is make sure that nobody tries to succeed from your empire. The Ottoman Empire has already had a problem with succession problems with Greece and Serbia leaving the empire, and now they don't want any more to leave. And the way to do this is to ensure that cultural minority pops in your empire who are in their cultural homelands do not get overly upset and radicalized, because if they do, they will try and separate and it will fail this mission. So the way you do that is by ensuring that many of your pops get the needs they have. That's this quality of standard of living. It makes people happy. And the way to do that is to ensure they get the goods they need. So if you go over to here in your market, you can see the goods that are necessary to keep your pops happy. And most of your pops need basic goods like services, pop consumption, so you can see here, Food production, this is not quite as necessary, but still helpful. Definitely furniture, definitely clothing, definitely food, fabric they consume, fish, here's clothing, wood, booze, fruits, meat, that kind of stuff, tobacco. And so if you make sure that your pops get the things they need, they will be less likely to rebel. The second thing in this area that's very important is that you'll get missions that come up, little events that pop up over here. And it'll talk about minority issues going on in your empire. Usually it's sort of a riot or tensions building, and what I suggest you do is send in the military every time. It's sort of the middle options and the ones that I saw, and that middle option has the highest likelihood of success on your part, which will quell any sort of rebellion in your empire. You can also, if you're really, really stuck, get to police, which you get that one of these police forces down, probably dedicated police force, which will reduce radicals and state penalties for turmoil, which may help stave off any sort of separatist movement. However, again, you're eating up precious bureaucratic change time for laws that you need for other reforms. So for this reform, just try and keep your pops happy. Make sure you pick the option that is the highest likely success when the events come up when dealing with groups that are brewing. The second reform you should work on right at the beginning of the game is bureaucratic reform. Now this one is important to get out of the way because it is the most contingent on RNG. The way laws are passed in the game requires a dice roll to occur after a period of time which is based on the legitimacy of your government as well as how much authority you have. Authority cuts down the enactment time of laws, as does the legitimacy of your government, if you look over here. So when you want to pass laws for this one, you need to pass two important things. First, the one you probably do right away is getting rid of hereditary bureaucrats. Hereditary bureaucrats need to get moved to appointed bureaucrats. You can click this right away, get it moving, and see what you can do. You have relatively low clout at the beginning with the intelligentsia and the petite bourgeoisie only adding 13%. And because only one of them is in government, it'll be fairly low to start, only 8.7. But just take every option that allows you to increase that, even if it's going to cost you money, even if it's going to create a few radicals. Because it is important that these get passed quickly, because you have a limited amount of time. 20 years seems like a long amount of time, and I'm going to keep saying this, but it is very short in this game, especially if you're relying on RNG. I've had this fail 4 or 5 times, to the point where I've had to restart it a couple of times in the game, like close out this enactment process and restart it 2 years later to try and get it to go. So make sure you start this very early. And the second one you need is to change your land-based taxation away from consumption and land-based. So these two cannot happen, which means you need to go to per capita because it's really the only one that's reachable at this time. But if you read the description of per capita taxation, it says it's disallowed by traditionalism law in the economic system. So what does that mean? Over here we got the economic system, and currently we have traditionalism selected. We don't want this. We want to move to one of these other systems. You could move to interventionism, agrarianism, or laissez-faire, but the easiest one to get to, because it has the most support, if you look over here, because rural people and industrial people support this, is agrarianism. And it also has the least amount of opposition. Well, it's equal to interventionism, but it's still fairly low. And it's not bad. It adds more aristocrats to your economy, and you can subsidize some stuff. It's pretty good. But as you read in the description there, it requires romanticism. So the very first tech you should research should be over here in society, romanticism. Get that out of the way. So while you're getting your bureaucratic change from hereditary to appointed, you get your tech out of the way, and then you change traditionalism to agrarianism as best you can. Again, taking as many of the events as this cycles, to try and increase the likelihood of success. And once that's done, you move on to the per capita taxation to complete the bureaucratic process. Now, while you're doing this, it's going to impact the amount of bureaucracy you have. So right when you've done all 3 of those enactments and you're ready to go, you've hit the top 3 checks here, and your bureaucracy still needs to be greater to or above 0, and the country cannot be sliding into a bureaucratic deficit. And the way to do that is to eliminate any trade routes you have right at the end, as well as building government administration buildings, was to add plus 50. So you build a couple of them, you get rid of all your trade routes right at the end, and you can pass bureaucratic reform. Once it's passed, you can bring back the trade routes and spend the bureaucratic points. That doesn't matter. All it matters is getting it done right away. So this requires the most RNG, so it's important to start at the beginning because it requires the most laws to change. The third one you want to really concentrate on right at the beginning, just like the other two, you have to start this right at the beginning, is urbanization. Now urbanization is a little tricksy to read because the way it's written is not particularly clear. But what it says here is that you need 75% of all your states to be incorporated states, which is easy for the Ottoman Empire because all your states are incorporated at the beginning of the game, and you need 75% of them to have an urban center. So what an urban center is, if you head over here and you go to urban, actually it's easier to just do it this way, Albania, information, urbanization is the stat you're looking at. And if for every 100 points of urbanization, you gain an urban center in a state. Albania here has 45, so it does not have an urban center. But if you go to Hudavendigar here, it has 250, so it has 2 urban centers in it. But you only need 1 per state. And at the beginning of the game, you have 28 states, which means you need 21 to have an urban center to pass the urbanization reform. And right at the beginning of the game, you only have 8 that do. So you're short 13 states with an urban center. So what I would recommend you doing is clicking on all the stars next to the states that do not have urban centers, put them in your sidebar here, and then concentrate on building urbanization in these states. I might avoid urbanization in states with very low urbanization, like Ottoman Adana here has 0 urbanization and a very small pop. That'll be too hard to get up to the right level. The East Aegean Islands, similar story, it's only got 5, probably not a good idea. So you pick 13 of these that are reasonably sized and work your way towards getting the urbanization, which is not that hard because some states start at like 40 and other states are much higher, like Bosnia, which starts at 80. It can be not a difficult journey to get all the way up there. But how do you get urbanization is the question you may be asking. Well, that's by building industry. So farms across the board give you 5 urbanization per level. So 1 level of banana plantation will give you 5 urbanization. We say we built it in Bosnia here, it would make it to 85 once it's built. Resources, logging and fishing buildings also give 5 urbanization. All the mines give 10, so build mines because it's very useful for your economy. And 10's a nice number. And then your industry, except for steel, all give 20. So even 1 industry in Bosnia, you build 1 glassworks in Bosnia, it would take you up the urbanization level you want. And once it's complete, you can take it off the list over here and go, look, now we're at 9 of 21 that I need. So plan ahead. What I like to do is pick all the ones I want to build, but based where they would be well built. So I look at resources where they can be built. Oh, where are my coal mines? Oh, they're only in Kastamonu here. Oh, and southern Serbia, that's good. Oh, and Diyarbakir. Diyarbakir. So I have a hard time saying that one. Over here, build them in these things. So I don't need one in Aden because that one's already got urbanization, and this is that too small state. Let's not do there. And then same thing with iron mines. They can only go in certain locations. You build them up in Erzurum and Trebizond here. Lead mines, you build them up in Bosnia and South Serbia, in Erzurum, right? And then you pick and choose what you need. From there, you should be able to get the urbanization up pretty quick. And once that's done, you can pass this particular reform. Now, one thing to note is that you should also be building construction industries, which do add to urbanization, and you want to build these up as you're building up your urbanization to get to like 40 to 50 construction so you can build on time, because you only have 20 years and these things take weeks and weeks to build. And so you're going to run out of time to build up the urbanization you need unless you build your construction industry along with it. So make sure you do that as well. The fourth and final reform you need to do is army modernization, and this is probably the most difficult. Often I don't get this done until the last year of 6 Man of Europe. Maybe you can get it done faster, but for me it's difficult. And part of the problem is that armies are expensive. And so building a professional army up without the economy behind it will put you into debt very quickly. So starting this up at year 10 might make the most sense. And what you need to do is get 250 battalions in your empire. You need to research Napoleonic warfare. And you either need to get rid of all your barracks, which I don't recommend because it makes your army weak and relies on conscripts, which are crappy, or changing all your army to be more professional than they are by getting rid of regular infantry, infantry focus, and cannon artillery in your army. And what does that mean? Well, you can take a look at your army by going over the buildings. In the development tab, it shows you all your barracks and conscription centers and naval bases, which we don't need for this particular thing. And in this section, you can change what kind of unit you have your army standardized on. And if you go from irregular infantry to line infantry to get rid of that, and that's the easiest one to move to because it requires one tech, which you should probably get anyhow in the tech tree. But to do so, you're going to need to produce small arms. You need one small arm per barrack, and we're going to need 250 minimum barracks to get this done. So you're going to have to start building an arms industry at around year 10. Once you've got the basics of your other industries, such as wood and iron and coal and so on, built up, as well as meeting the needs of all your pops, as well as having some cash crops to sell off, you can see how this is getting difficult. The other one you want to change is the artillery support. So you want to move up to mobile artillery, which you will get anyhow when you research Napoleonic warfare, which is a requirement of army modernization. And then again, you will also have to produce artillery. So producing artillery is again at the arms factories, and you produce about one per battalion, and so you'll need 250 artillery. You change these over right at the end when you're ready to move on to finishing army modernization, and when you get your arms industry waking up. The best thing to do is to change some of these at a time, so you don't overload your industry. Now, one thing important to remember is that these things don't build at or grow at the same rate as everybody else. If we go to Albania here, which I think has one of these in it. No, it does not. Bosnia? Bosnia does. Most industries like this livestock ranch, when you build a new one, it adds another 5,000 slots for employees, and those employees are sucked up from the peasantry fairly quickly at about 10% per tick. And this fills up the industry very quickly, within a few months. However, soldiers are trained, so they fill up their role much slower. In fact, if you look here, there's a 100 training rate under total modifiers there. This doesn't say, unfortunately. So total modifiers there says 100 training rate. So that means it's going to fill up 100 every tick to try and get to the next thing. So if you built one more base here, which is 1,000, which is one battalion, it's going to take 10 ticks to get to the next level. Now, the more barracks you have, the faster this ticks. However, so if you look at Thrace, for instance, this ticks at 400 a pop. So it'll build faster here. But that said, you're going to have to make sure that you build these ahead enough a time that they could fill up their employees in time to meet the requirement, because the battalion only counts when it's full, not when you've just built the barracks. But not so soon that you're going to tank your economy, because these soldiers require pay and they require equipment, and all that is very expensive, and it's going to sink your economy. Now, one tip I found, and I don't know why this works exactly, is that right before my time was up, let's say 2 years to go, a year and a half to go, I declare war, I mobilize my army. What I have, you should be over 200 at that point, of regulars, as well as my conscripts, and that seemed to accelerate the process in which I got army mobilization. Last time I completed it within 30 weeks to the final date. So try that as well. If you're getting close to the edge, try declaring a war and getting yourself mobilized. So that should be the end of getting the Sick Man of Europe. Once you've completed all those, this will end and you will get the event, the Reorganization, which is a good event that gives you a bunch of bonuses you can choose from, either claims on Greece, or better arms industry, or so on and so forth. So I hope this guide helped you. Please leave comments below if you have any tips on dealing with the Ottoman Empire and the Sick Man of Europe. And I hope to see you in a future video.